Elon Musk, GOP presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy, and entrepreneur David Sachs were among several participants of a virtual rendezvous discussing the need for world leaders to prioritize peace, diplomacy, and cooperation to avoid another global war. Here's a snippet of the hour-and-a-half conversation, starting with Elon Musk.
How do we avoid World War III? Because if you look at the various conflicts currently and likely potential conflicts, these things are obviously bad. There's people that a lot of people die and suffer, but they're not civilizational risks. But World War III is a civilizational risk that we may not recover from. So we want to, I think, prioritize avoiding World War III.
Ramaswamy also joined the conversation in which he warned the U.S. is ill-equipped to handle another world war. Let's listen.
I think it's important for people to understand, especially when the U.S. homeland is as vulnerable as we have been in modern memory, not just from a border perspective, but from missile defense or cyber defense or defenses against super electromagnetic pulse attacks. I think this is where I am attempting, unsuccessfully so far, but attempting to awaken a GOP from what appears to be a deep slumber.
So, can another world catastrophe be avoided? Retired Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis took part in that discussion too, and he's here with us today to discuss this question further. Welcome, Colonel Davis.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
All right, so I've been accused of being hyperbolic whenever I've raised in other contexts outside of this show the question of the imminence of a potential global conflict. Can you walk us through the likelihood of that and what kind of tipping points could lead to that outcome?
Well, I'll tell you, nothing is ordained. Everything is still possible, and that means peace is possible, or at least the avoidance of an expansive war. But look, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy are both right. I mean, the risk is high, and I think that by people downplaying this, we just make the potential even that much higher. Everything, I think, is going to come down to really what happens once Israel launches its incursion into the Gaza Strip. I think it's foreordained at this point. I personally would argue that they would benefit from delaying that for a number of reasons, but I think that the pressure is too great on the Israeli government. I think they're probably going to move. It depends on then what happens after that. You have Hamas in the northern part that's threatened to open a northern front against Israel so that they'll have a two-front war. Whether that would happen immediately or whether they would delay and let Israel get deeply engaged before doing that, who knows? But then the big question is what happens next? Now you have the folks like Lindsey Graham who's saying, yeah, we should just basically assume that is the same thing as Iran getting involved, and so we should go after Hezbollah. And then if Iran does anything to us as a result of that, or if Iran does anything to our troops in the region, then we should go after them. We should destroy their oil infrastructure, etc. The problem with this, I mean, there's a bunch of problems, is that underestimates what the reaction would be. We still think that this is like the 1990s, or we think that they're like, say, Syria, when President Trump and Biden both launched missile attacks into their country, and Syria was so weak they couldn't do anything in response, and they didn't. But this situation is very, very different than that because there are so many additional actors. And you're talking about we have vulnerability with our troops in Iraq, with our troops in Syria, which have already been attacked even earlier today. So far, thank God, none of them have been killed. But, the minute that changes and one of our troops actually dies because of this, now that that the screams from that, that pro-war lobby in the United States, and those are big time on the Hawk side, will be screaming for an attack on Iran, saying that's who did it, oblivious to the fact that could draw us into a war. And that's the big danger, is that once those things start happening, then war takes on a momentum of its own and no one can control what happens next.
Tucker Carlson said recently that if we had another world war, there's no guarantee the U.S. would win. In fact, I think he said the U.S. would lose. Vivek, in his remarks there, mentioned the weakness of the U.S.'s position. And then, Nikki Haley, who's on the totally opposite side foreign policy from Vivek and Tucker, was talking about the need to give the Defense Department, to rename it the Department of Offense and then give it whatever it needs to conduct a lot of intervention. In your opinion, what is the state of the U.S.'s ability to defend itself currently versus where we might have been historically in terms of how untouched and unrivaled we were?
When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1992, and the United States had just cleaned the clock of Iraq and Desert Storm, China was still basically a third world country. They had a peasant army. They were not a threat to anyone anywhere. I mean, they could barely defend their own borders and their internal situation. And that moment, we were absolutely the preeminent power on the globe. Nobody could do anything to us. Problem is, too many people today still have that mentality. We still think that's true, and the world has radically changed since that time. And now, just in relative terms, we're no longer this, unrivaled, unchallenged power. There are challenges. There are rivals that are on there. There's peers, there's near peers, and we can't just do what we want anymore. And now, especially in the Middle East, you're seeing that there is so much anger that's building up, and so many people are doing things that don't make any sense. Like Hamas attacking Israel. I mean, in the balance of power is just off the charts between the two. And if it stays just in Gaza, Hamas has no chance of winning, but yet they attacked anyway. And so the risk is that other people say, even though this doesn't make sense, the United States is strong, we may attack anyway. Now, Robbie, I'll tell you, as we've talked about on your show plenty of times over the last year or so, all of this military equipment we keep sending to Ukraine, all of these shells we keep sending, these rockets, these missiles, air defense systems, all these things we keep giving to Ukraine has depreciated our capacity to wage war. So our ability to defend our interests is now substantially weaker than it was in February 2022. Now then you're talking, we've already diverted more shells into Israel. So our stocks are even further depleted, and it's going to take years to recover from that. So no, we are not as strong as we were even 20 months ago. And the longer we keep going with this, the longer we keep giving our tanks, our Bradleys, our self-propelled howitzers, millions of rounds of artillery, we're going to get even weaker. If this does spark into a war, Nikki Haley is wrong. We don't have the capacity to beat everybody. And I hope Tucker's wrong that we might lose, but it's not for sure either way.
So if you were in Joe Biden's shoes, what would you be advising with respect to next steps, encouraging or discouraging ground troops and the like? What should the anti-war community be agitating for as they are trying to push the Biden administration in a pro-peace direction?
Yeah, look, if you're a pro-war advocate, if you're an American that desires our country to be secure, you should be the one leading this charge and saying, hey, we don't have the capacity and the power that we once had. And if things go sideways pretty bad, we could be in real trouble. What we should say is, hey, we need to put the brakes on what we've been doing in Ukraine. That's going to have to slow down dramatically, if not stop. And certainly at some point it needs to. In Israel, we need to say, hey, we can help you with stuff here. We can give you some equipment and some ammunition and other things that you might need. But you are going to have to provide your own security. That's the reason that we've been giving them $3.8 billion annually and for decades of money, so that they have a military that's strong enough to defend themselves. And they do. We succeeded with that. They can handle Hamas. And if Hezbollah attacks from the north, they can handle that too. Look, they've already done it. The 1967 war, the 1973 war, we didn't help them fight then. And they handled it. So it's a multi-front war. They're in a similar situation now. They could potentially be, and they can handle it. So I would recommend that President Biden not use military force, not fight Hezbollah, so that we don't get sucked into a war. And I would advise to get those troops that we have on the ground in Iraq and in Syria out. As I've been arguing for years, I think on your show previously, all they do is sit there in the middle of the desert and act as an target of opportunity for our enemies. But they do nothing for our national security. So we need to get that vulnerability out, because if something happens to those troops, they've been attacked several times already, but so far no casualties. But if it does, like I just said, there'll be a lot of demand on the White House to respond, which could spark a war. So let's get our vulnerabilities out of the way. Let's don't get into a war, and let's start actually rebuilding our military strength before we go looking for dragons to slay elsewhere.
Oh. Daniel Davis, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
And it looks like you have a new setup. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on with your new show?
I do, yeah. We have a new show. It's called Deep Dive, Daniel Davis Deep Dive, and it's on YouTube. And basically what we're doing is saying, hey, you watch a newscast, MSNBC, Fox, CNN, you get a 3 or 4 minute hit, but you don't get a chance to really know what's going on beneath the surface or get a better understanding. So we have a show here that takes the issues that are most concerning to Americans, and we go into a deeper dive on it so that you have more knowledge about what's going on, and we can tell you why things are more important. And importantly, also, when some people make certain claims that aren't challenged on the air, we will challenge them, so you'll know what the truth is.
That sounds terrific. Thanks again for your time today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.